tend to think of poetry as language in its most imaginative form. And although Let the Poets Govern by Camonghne Felix is not a poetry collection, I think it is very much involved in the conversation of poetics and of imagination and of imagining better and greater things for ourselves. For ourselves. So as I said, it's not a poetry collection, it's nonfiction, and I think it's somewhere between kind of theory, political kind of essay and memoir, and there's some poetry. So it kind of brings us into a number of different arenas. So for one, it takes us through Felix's life through kind of the lens of her relationship to poetry at different points in her life, and going from when she was a young kid who was skipping school to and developing her poetry practice and her relationship to language, to when she's older and she's working in the political sphere as a communications professional. She explores how her relationship to language evolved throughout that time and how she came to think of the practical and kind of political purpose of poetry, and then subsequently rethinking that purpose and rethinking where it fits into that arena, where it actually doesn't fit. Spoiler alert. Within this kind of context, I suppose, she also explores how language and specifically kind of poetics and the persuasive power of poetics has been used as a tool of oppression to bring the idea of slavery to life and to perpetuate and enforce that system. How she kind of walks us through how language has been a fundamental part of that. As I said, she did work in politics, and she talks a lot about how at the time she thought that her skill and her creativity as a poet could be used as a means to enact change within this system that we have. So she's very much working within the framework of working within the system and voting, and how committing to these incremental changes will ultimately lead us to our goal, lead us to freedom, lead us to kind of break out of this oppression. And can ultimately, she comes to the conclusion as she's doing this work, she makes the argument that we cannot find freedom, we cannot find resistance within this framework, within the system that has been shaped and is upholded by oppressive language, by language that is flattened, and language that limits the imagination and limits kind of the ideas of what we think our world can look like. She makes a case that working within the framework we have is not it's not the way forward, it's not the way out. As I said, the poetics has been co-opted by the system. So if we go back, to poetics, back to poetry as it is and as it should be, it very much can be a kind of a fundamental part of finding freedom, of resistance, of subversion. So in the way that poetry has been co-opted, it can be taken back and used as a means of freedom, because poetry, in the way that it is supposed to be, in the way that it is meant to be practiced, it is something that invites resistance. It invites subversion of expectation, especially when you're thinking about the practice of Black poets and how when we think of form, how that can be studied, it can be learned, it can be mastered, but then ultimately reworked and extracted from to make something better. And so you can expand that and think that, like, the language that we have now, yes, it has been used as a tool of oppression, as a tool of limiting people. It can conversely be used as a means of expanding the imagination, expanding what expanding our ideas of what we think the world can be and should be. And and it gets back to kind of the title of the book, "Let the Poets Govern," because because the poets are committed to the truth. Poets are committed to breaking things down to the very kind of minute definitions of things, like what is freedom, what is it, who is a citizen, what is a law, who gets to have the power and why. Poets are very much committed to asking those questions, and I think what Felix also gets at is that, like, being committed to asking those questions and to kind of not just believing what the system tells you. That is the key to our freedom. That is the way we get free. That is the way we move forward. That is the way we expand our imaginations and move to a better world. It's not necessarily about trying to fix the system and trying to change the system and trying to find freedom within a cage that wishes to keep you in it. The key is to break out of that and to think of, like, what else can we do, because obviously this didn't work the first time, so it's like now it's time to try something different. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I love anything that asks you to take a look at language and what is the purpose, what is it, what is the effect. I love anything that kind of gets into that conversation, and I think Felix does an excellent job of framing that conversation and inviting us to think bigger about the language that we use and the power of language. So yeah, Let the Poets Govern. Read it.